mentioned about the reef structures, we have a lot of reefs out there. I don't know if if they're close enough. I don't know how far the closest one is, but certainly we could use, if they were, we wouldn't have to build new reef structures if we have something out there already.
Okay. I will tell you, so the reason that we came up with just survey design and permit is the average construction cost to do that is about $6 million. But the beauty of it is that, so we just settled with BP and Transocean, so there's $18.7 billion out there for restoration projects. And so what a lot of the things we've been targeting is you take a little bit of funding and you leverage that to get your bigger dollars. So if we were to approach NIFWF with this project and say, hey, we're asking for, if we remove some of the fisheries enhancement stuff, take out, so we cut it down to $500,000. And we get that funded, we could then apply the next year or apply for NERDA funding or apply for Bay County funding or apply for the Gulf Consortium's funding or apply for there's so many pots of money. And you say, hey, we've already got the survey design permit, this thing's ready to go. All we need is some construction costs. That's how these things have been naturally progressing. And there's been a lot of success this way of taking a little bit of funding from one funding pot and using that as leverage to go for bigger dollars in each other's bigger pots.
And Cameron, on those project slides where it talks about leverage, that's what you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank y'all.
One other thing I wanted to talk about real quick was the Bay County restoration funding process. I know previous meeting we discussed that we wanted to see if we could tap into some of that funding for the repairs on the pier, and there's funding available, but due to the cycles and the timing of it, repairs of the pier might not fit, but possibly replacement of the pier might fit. But I'll let Cameron talk a little bit more about that program, timelines, where they're currently at, and then we can pick up from there.
Yeah. So all the counties, as y'all are aware, received initial settlement money from the Transocean settlement. Each county around here got between $3 and $5 million. And most counties open up solicitation to people to provide proposals for projects. Bay County received an enormous amount of projects. I think this initial settlement was around $4 million is what they had to work with. So they developed a Restore Act committee to come up and evaluate each proposal, come up with their top proposals that they would recommend for Bay County funding. That's already been selected, and they've come up with their top. I think they were able to get 11 projects done out of that first initial settlement. But that does not include the BP settlement funding, which is going to be dispersed to the counties over the next 17 years. So each county has the task of developing a MIOP, which is a multi-year implementation plan, which is what you submit to Treasury Department, and it says how you're going to spend all the monies that you're going to be receiving. So Bay County's in the process of developing their MIOP, and it will kind of set the tone for how the funding is going to be distributed over the next 17 years. But that opens up the potential to develop, and also, like I said, there's so many pots of money. That's another local source that we could go after for Bay County funding in the years to come. It just takes, I don't know this area as intimately as you all do, and it's y'all talking to me, pegging off ideas, things, needs, wants, and we can come up with the verbiage to get you a grant to hopefully get some funding to do the projects. But that's, we've got, like I said, there's plenty of time. So, there's no rush. The pier might be a little rushed, but I don't know that we can get Bay County funding for that right now. But that's something to consider down the road as you're looking at funding sources to do projects.
Would the pier fall into the NIFWIF?
Absolutely. That's one of those that I like to call improving the public's access and use of natural resources. And that's one of the things that they evaluate. And that, I mean, NIFWIF also includes infrastructure related. So if you're, like a lot of projects that have been approved have been like taking septic tanks, failing septic tanks that are right on waterways that connect out to the Gulf, getting them sewer access. So I mean, it's infrastructure related things, but also, again, improving the public's use and access of natural resources. So that's why when I talked about like the Salt Creek thing, having, providing that as a canoe or kayak access, I mean, that's big time. You just start checking all those boxes on that NIFWIF application. That makes it a more desirable project.
So perhaps that's an option for the pier in the near term, if we're saying BP money is 17 years out, so maybe that's an option we can look at.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. NERDA is actually a great, the Natural Resource Damage Assessment. They received the largest chunk of the BP settlement, and they are all about, so like the Noriega Point restoration over in Destin, a lot of the boat ramp improvements, park improvements, they're all about improving people's access and use of natural resources. So NERDA would be another great option if it wasn't NIFWIF. But I mean, there's so many different pots of money that it's, we've been given a great opportunity with this this settlement, as horrific as the oil spill was, but we can do some really good things.
So is there any kind of time frame for the NIFWIF? Or is that just it's an ongoing,
So NIFWIF is funded through 2018.
right?
Typically, they like to have proposals submitted around the March-ish timeframe.
Okay.
And they typically evaluate, and it's kind of like an RAI process, like a permit process. So it's the first application is pretty general, just what are you going to do, how's it going to approve these things, and then they'll come back and they'll evaluate your project and they'll come back with a lot of questions. And you go through about 3 rounds of questioning, and then on the 4th round they'll actually send their representatives out, and they'll do a site visit and they'll walk through the project with you. And they might want to make some modifications, some revisions based off their expertise, that, hey, it might be better to do it this way, and we can, it's a process, but it typically by November is when they award. So that March to November timeframe is when you got time to really work on your project and make it really formal and official and finalize and clean everything up.
And last question, do we need an ordinance or resolution from the city for us to pursue these? NIFWIF, do you?
That's
Case by case basis?
yeah, of the clients that I've done BP funding for, some have not required a resolution to allow me to write the grant. Some have asked that they pass a resolution for me to write the grant. I don't know how Mexico Beach works. Like I said, it's varied across between city and county that I've worked for.
Okay, well, we can work with Mel to figure out what we need to do officially if this is something that the city wants to pursue.
Yeah, we're going to have a little time to absorb this one as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right. I was going to go through and kind of touch on the hot topics, hot projects that we have going on. And then at the end, if anybody has questions on some of the ones that I skip over, I'll be more than happy to provide any kind of update or information I might have. For starters, let's talk canal improvements. The last time we were in one of the workshops, we were talking about the channel markers. We were leaning towards the steel, and then we wanted us to pursue some more information on the timber piles supporting the channel markers themselves. Captain Chip spoke about the benefits of the timber pile versus a steel pile if a boat were to accidentally bump into it. I spoke with one of our coastal engineering SMEs, subject matter experts from Dewberry, and he didn't actually mention Captain Chip by name, but he echoed his sentiments that if we do have a bit of a tricky pass or a tricky entrance to the canal, the timber is certainly more forgiving and probably a better product to use than the steel piles. So with that information, I think Councilwoman Albrecht also asked us to check with Dr. Sidman, who provides the funding for Sea Grant, to see if they would be amenable to us swapping out the piles and we'd still be able to utilize that money. I spoke with Dr. Sidman. He did some research on his own, and he concurs that if we do have a pass that we would deem to be kind of tricky, not dangerous, but could be tricky to boaters, recreational boaters that aren't familiar with it, that the timber pile would be a product that they would still support. It increases boater safety. I also, in my conversations, mentioned to him that I was speaking with a structural engineer to get a proper embedment depth and treatment so that marine wood-boring organisms wouldn't cut short its service life, and it would be more resilient. So he confirmed that the funding that we've received from him would still be applicable to the wood piles. So the next step for us is to get a proposal for the timber design of the piles and the connection of all the equipment up top, and then from there have that priced out by Harders. So that's where we're at on that project, on that phase of that project, and we just need direction from the city. Do we want to pursue the design of this, the pricing of it, or do we want to split between 2 steel piles further out and 2 wood piles closer to shore? What approach do we want to take from here is the direction we need at this point. So, anyone have any questions?
Well, if the fishermen, if they are suggesting the wood, then I would say go with the wood. They're the experts. I am not. And also, you talked about the protection where would meet the sand and the water.
Right. There's a.
Would you be looking at that price too?
Oh yeah, we'd be pricing
okay.
out the entire package to install these.
Okay.
I did talk with Harders, our contractor down here. He said 14-inch wood poles would be fine. They could put them down to the proper depth, everything would be fine. The wood, the additional size of the wood would combat the worms. And it's something they could do very easily, and they have the equipment they could put it down with easily. By moving, the concern about maintenance on the lights could easily be accomplished on a wood pole, just like we could a metal one, and can save thousands of dollars. So I would also endorse the wood poles.
And speaking of experts, I also spoke with Lieutenant Campbell, I think is our new POC at the Coast Guard, and he confirmed that they're okay with timber or steel piles. Either material suits them. So, which Councilwoman Blackburn, that probably contradicts one of my previous statements that contradicted another one of my previous statements. So the good news, when you contradict yourself, you're both right and wrong.
That's right, that's good.
So anyway, I apologize for that before.
No.
So that's kind of where we're at on the channel markers. On the electrical work at the canal, we previously talked about sending the power underground versus serving overhead. And it's funny when sometimes when the light bulb comes on, we've had these conversations about always under the impression that all of that power out there is going to be sent underground, not just from the power poles to the boat docks themselves. In talking further about it, the pricing that we received was simply, are they going to bore under the road to provide power to the boat docks? It wasn't that entire run of power down Canal Parkway was going to go underground. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on that, because I was actually under the impression that when they were talking about sending the power, all the power underground, it meant all the lines along Canal Parkway. That's not the case. So I want
So
to
the
make sure.
telephone poles are still going to, are still going to be there.
Correct.
It's just going to go from there underground, under the road,
Correct.
to the docks.
Correct.
So I do have another question about that. So it will be, I'm assuming in conduit, and that conduit will go under the road and under the concrete sidewalk?
Well, if we decide to go overhead, and that, which was the original plan, overhead to cross the street and then down and under, that would result in about a $2,600 change order to the project, based on what we were talking about before. If we wanted to put everything from the existing power poles to the docks underground, that would result in about a $35,000 change order.
It came to my attention that we're still gonna have light poles on the canal. And for $35,000, we're talking about running a wire underneath the
the
dirt
road.
instead of just going pole to pole, which they're already both gonna be there. That doesn't pass the make sense test. The small change order to round out the power company's cost is minimal. We're still gonna have the poles, we're gonna have lights all the way down the canal. Doesn't make sense to spend $35,000 to just stick it from the transmission line. Go look down the north-south line, those big transmission lines are all gonna still be there.
So we'll need a direction on which way the city wants to go, underground or overhead. Based on,
Well, I
Everything
think we
we've
should go
looked at.
overhead just like we planned it in the original plan.
okay, then we'll prepare the documents for that.
Do you need a vote?
We've got a couple items to talk about. We can either vote on them as we go or as a group. So,
So far, I think we have consensus on the two issues we've talked about so far.
okay. Next one is something that was mentioned at the last workshop, the pre-agenda workshop. The existing pavilion down there is beginning to fail. Mayor, I think last week you were talking about it. There's a huge crack right down the middle of the foundation, and it's actually starting to list towards the canal. We got a cost from Harders to demo it, and it would be to demo the pavilion and then just grade out that area consistent with what's in the plans on either side of it. So the contours would just carry on down to, the elevations would just carry on down to the sidewalk. That cost is $5,200, $5,200. So,
To be clear too, the sidewalk and the cap is gonna run all the way past that pavilion, all the way down to the curve of the canal.
Right.
That's something we talked about before. It's always been in the plan to go all the way past the pavilion.
Right.
And actually, it would help them at this point to get that out of the way,
yes,
to put all that in and then back grade it and
yes,
still make it nice, and we can put the pavilion back in later.
right.
I just want to ask a question.
Sure.
Did we know, I mean, it wasn't the plan to demo the pavilion.
I think it was, let me back up. It's an old structure,
It wasn't planned, but we knew there was a really good chance it could be damaged.
well put.
It could be damaged. And so there's no requirement, I mean, there's nothing in there. I mean, we just said if it's damaged during construction, so be it. I mean, we didn't,
That was the thought process. I think there was hope that it would remain. Philip, was that?
Mhm.
But we're not surprised that it got
and
damaged.
did that happen when they were putting the sheet piles there?
Yeah,
near the canal-
they're installing
near the
those
pavilion?
within 10 feet of it.
So I'm understanding that what you're asking is it the construction company's fault that the pavilion, is that what you're asking?
Well, I just wondered under the terms and conditions of the contract, if they had an obligation to make sure that was secured, or we just said, if you tear it down, that's okay, we'll pay you to demolish it. I mean, that's kind of, that's where I'm going. If I feel like they're,
Well, if I-
Put
if
that
I
way,
may-
it sounds pretty bad.
If
But,
I may,
oh, absolutely.
we knew that there was huge voids up under the pavilion. We knew that the concrete was coming apart. We knew that the pilings didn't set very far down in the ground. We knew it was a very real possibility that this thing would fall. We talked with HG Harders about it and agreed to move forward. We knew that this was a possibility.
so if we knew that, why don't we just factor that demolition into the,
Because our
Contract.
fingers were crossed that it wouldn't fall apart.
That's correct. That would be a third thing on,
Yes. Next item that would also result in a small add to the contract is the north end of the wall where it turns back to meet the existing grade. Originally, it was planned to go past the existing piles that are supporting that boardwalk across that span. But once we realized that that pile is the final support for that run of the boardwalk, we pulled the sheet pile back in front of it, and we're just going to establish the connection, the small gap connection there from the end of the wall to the new boardwalk that was going to be constructed. And in doing so, turning the wall back towards the land, there's a small gap, about a half of a sheet gap, that allows water during the mean high water to get behind the wall. And what that'll do is that'll wash out the sediment under the sidewalk, eventually causing the sidewalk to collapse. So Harders has told us that to add 1/2 sheet pile in that location, which would then make that connection with land above that high water elevation, thus keeping the water from getting back there and washing out behind it and under the sidewalk, it would be $2,700.
Too bad they can't just give it to us because we're good people. For $2,700.
I know they would love to, but
For $2,700.
A half a sheet of, one half sheet of the pile.
yes.
So there are no extra half sheets, I mean, all
No,
of
they,
that.
no, they have that. That's the cost to actually install it
Oh,
and touch
so they're
weld it.
not charging us for the sheet pile, they're charging
Correct.
us for the installation of the
Correct.
sheet pile.
Correct.
That's not really clear where you're talking about. Are you talking about down next to Salt Creek?
Yes, on that section of bank is not part of the improvements where we have that boardwalk out. There's the existing boardwalk that's failing. And then that was to tie into the north-south portion of the wall. And then also, on the other end, tie into the east-west portion.
I understand.
Okay.
Now, I also understand that actually the entrance to Salt Creek, the riprap and the concrete there is not actually part of this plan.
That is correct. That is correct. And what this is, the original plan, I don't know if I explained it well, but the original plan talked about the wall coming up, and if this is the last pile in that run of boardwalk, the wall was to come up and turn, just like we've been going around the other piles, all the way down. It was to go and to tie in up there against the bank, and that would have tied in at an elevation high enough that this high water elevation wouldn't have caused an issue. But since we have to come back here, the distance over to where, I don't usually have to worry about bumping my head. The distance to where we have to tie in is about 2.5 feet more, or half the width of half a pile. And so that's where the need for that arises, so that we're above that water elevation, so that we don't have the washout, the undermining of the sidewalk.
Okay.
And again, that was $2,700. The last thing that we need to talk about on the canal, I believe, is that boardwalk itself. That's part of the project to add new stringers and new decking across the top. And the adding the stringers was necessary because the spacing of the existing stringers was too wide to support the load for composite decking versus the weight of the wood decking on top. So we had additional stringers added in there. And do you guys understand what the stringers are? Okay. We had additional stringers added in there so that it would carry the load of the composite decking on top. Upon demolition of the decking that's currently there, it's been noticed that the top 2 inches or so of the wood is rotten. And not only would you not be able to bear on it, but you couldn't be able to adequately fasten the composite decking to those stringers. So additional stringers will be needed. This one we don't have a price on from Harders just yet. But that's just kind of a something to be aware of that's coming up.
You're talking about the Salt Creek boardwalk?
The boardwalk that spans across that
Yeah, I thought the project didn't include anything with that.
Just the boardwalk.
Okay, and
Replacing the decking was included in.
it was, okay.
Not the framework, just wooden decking that you walk
With a
on,
composite.
with a composite.
Okay, okay. So no idea what the pricing is on that?
Not yet. Bill at Harder's is still pulling that together for us. So as far as costs that we know of tonight, the underground installation, I'm sorry, the overhead installation, I've got those numbers backwards there on the update. The overhead installation is actually the $2,600 add. That's what was currently in the plans. And then we also have the demolition of the pavilion for $5,200, and then the added sheet pile for $2,700. And then we'll come back with a proposal for the cost of the design of the wood piles, including the protection and the connection of the channel markers on top.
And the chair will entertain a motion to approve a change order for 3 items.
Yeah, I'd like to see the change order first before I approve it. I mean,
Okay.
Well,
there's nothing, I mean, is there a deadline? I mean, are you, what's the timeframe?
Well, the demo of the pavilion, they're working in that area right now. Now would be a good time to get that done. The sheet pile, they have their, well, you know, the sheet pile they need to set because they're going to come back and start pouring the concrete cap soon. And without that sheet pile being in place, they'll have a cap that comes up and stops, and then we'll have to kind of do a repair to a new product. So,
Well, I guess we've known about the issue at the pavilion. I mean, we learned about that a couple weeks ago. So what's proper is bring us a change order and we examine the change order, and that's what we should be doing. I understand that the pavilion is sitting there. We can always call a special meeting, but it would have been nice to have the details tonight, and then we could have done that, but I think we have to.
understood. We got the pricing for the demo of the pavilion, I think, Friday? Or maybe even, anyway, about around Friday. I apologize for not getting that to you in change order form, but I also, at that point in time, I didn't know if we wanted to do the change order for the underground installation of the utilities, which was much larger, or overhead installation of the utilities, which was much smaller. And as you're doing your change orders, the existing contract amount kind of governs what the next total is going to be. So until we decided on that, my actual thought was that these are well under the $8,000 threshold that the city administrator can only sign for, that if you guys knew about them and would authorize him to execute them, then that would work. But that might be a poor approach on my part, so.
Yeah,
Well, if we really want to see the change order, we can hold off on the lights overhead, but go ahead tonight and approve the pavilion and the additional work to put in that $2,700,
The half sheet.
the half sheet.
Now,
that
this has
won't
kind of
be
run
in.
away from me. What I was trying to do was summarize the different changes to authorize them to prepare the change
Okay.
order.
Okay.
And then we could vote on it at the next meeting after our attorney has a chance to review the change order, to make sure all the paperwork was right.
Okay.
It just kind of got away from me there.
Sorry. Apologize.
Yeah, I mean, we've never had to vote to prepare a change order. You bring them to us and then we vote whether or not
Okay.
we vote up or down. And just for clarification, the $8,000, that would be for items already budgeted. Since this isn't unbudgeted, it still requires that vote.
Gotcha.
So you're talking about waiting until June to approve, is that the timeframe going to work?
To approve the change order, but he's got a lot of writing to do to put this thing together.
I know the writing part.
He's
but-
looking for guidance to put together a change order, is what I understand.
Call a
the-
I
special
know you need
meeting
some
when it's
approval
ready.
to do some things, but
The timeframe to do these things is sort of
The,
time is of the essence type thing?
well, for the electrical work at the canal, the last meeting we had, we went and actually spoke with the contractor in the middle of the meeting, and he said that he could wait to get direction this time.
That's right.
So
that's only the $2,600
Right.
to leave it the way it is in the contract, so it's not really a change, just an addendum to the price.
But, well, if it's not a change, how's it an addendum to the price? How can it be both? 'Cause is this the issue where they didn't get correct pricing from Duke?
That's right.
this is the issue where there was misunderstanding between what Duke was actually going to do versus what the contractor, where that line was.
How long would it take you to prepare the change order? Pull it all together with all the pricing?
I could probably, well, depending on, well, with the pricing that's known now, I could do that this evening.
So, I mean, we could just have a special meeting, get the change order, review it, and approve it. I don't think makes sense to wait until June. I mean,
Well, not particularly with the pavilion, if it's, that seems like the most important right now.
So I would say let him prepare it, and let's call a special meeting later this week and approve the changes.
Let's do them all at one time.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on the canal?
No, I appreciate you looking into those timber channel markers though.
Sure. Glad to do it. Let's see. Next item, talk about Parker Park. Last meeting, I think it was, I guess it's come to our attention that the project was voted on to be awarded to BCL. So we've spoken with Nick since then. We've got to change the contract language and the award documentation to denote that the first payment won't be made until the funding has been modified, so it's in line. So we'll work with Nick on that this week and get that information on over to BCL, notifying them of award after he's had a chance to review it.
So I actually have a question about that.
Sure.
I was not here at that meeting. So it was voted to award it to the low bidder. To do all of the items that were in the base bid,
The base bid, correct.
doesn't include the pavilion,
Correct.
doesn't include the bathrooms.
It does include the bathrooms.
It does include bathrooms. Okay, and do you remember off the top of your head, because I don't have it, what that bid number was?
$268,520.20.
268,000, okay. And obviously, we don't have that much money. So,
Well, we did. I mean, Lynn, we talked about the different pots of money, where we could pull it from, and I think that was even in Linda's motion. She broke it out where
There
the
was
money would come from.
100,000 from the Bay County. We have 137,000 in Park and Rec.
we're gonna use all of that?
No.
Well, we didn't say that we would, and we
Oh.
didn't say we wouldn't.
Okay,
That was available.
Okay.
And there's money, there's 3 or 500,000 in utilities and/or streets, so that would take care of the paving.
okay, so you've come up with a plan to pay for all of that 268,000. Is that correct?
We have the money to do that.
Okay.
And that was the
We
motion.
just have to choose which pots we want to. We have 100,000 from Bay County, so we have to come up with, say, 200,000 because I'm just rounding it off.
And, Adrian's been out of town. He left Thursday and just got back last night, or we would have expected a budget amendment on the agenda tonight, but it wasn't ready, so.
The rest of that story is, it's $174,100 short of what we currently have. So that money's got to come from somewhere
Other
else.
funds. Mhm.
Yep, 174.1. I voted against the project because it was too expensive. It contained 340 feet of sidewalk that we didn't ask for. And it also had a back road into 26th Street that got included in the base bid. That's something that was a political issue that we never voted on
No,
But we
wait a
put it in the
minute.
bid, we put it
We
out
put it in
for
the
bid.
bid, and we voted and approved the
So
bid.
I don't
yes.
understand how we can, and it's kind of went with the city, once again, the city hall idea. If you put it out for bid, then if we're not interested in it, it shouldn't have been in the bid.
Right. I mean, we all saw the bid, we all approved the bid, we all approved the base bid, what it included, and if there was an issue at that
But
time. it's just-
171,000, we do have the money. We do have the money. We have money from the utilities, we have money from the street, and we have 131,000 in parks and recs. That, I think at budget time last time, it was kind of talked about, well, if we can use this for the Parker Park. So we really do have the money.
We do.
It's just how much we take from each pot.
And you need to determine that before I can draft a
Right.
budget amendment.
So if all the utilities can be taken out of the utility fund, then I would suggest that that portion be taken from the utility fund. If whatever we can get from the road section would come out of the streets.
Did I hear you wrong, that we were awarded the FERDAP grant? Do we know that yet? We were awarded 50,000 for Parker Park for the FERDAP grant. That's
Playground
another
equipment.
50,000.
That's playground equipment.
As playground equipment, you can either do a splash pad or you can change it to playground equipment. either way.
Or benches and different things. I mean, we can, I
Yes.
know last year they let us change it to different things, so we should be
As
able
long
to.
as the core portion of it doesn't change, yes.
So there's 4,450 for utilities. And what would come off of the roads? We have sidewalk. Would all of that come off, be able to come from the road section, the road tax that we have?
Well, paving and maintenance can be used for paving and maintenance of streets, roads, whatever. Then the utility tax fund can be used for any public works project. So those are the two pots. Parks and Rec impact fees, I know there was a suggestion that we use the Park and Rec impact fees to rebuild the pavilion, but Park and Rec impact fees are for growth, increasing capacity, and so the pavilion would not fit under the statute for Parks and Rec impact fees.
Well, I think, and Mel, you would be able to tell us, or tell me, and maybe the others know already, under site work, what actually can come from the roads. Anything else can come from, anything on the list can come from either the roads or we have 3, 4, 5,
What's the total, 273?
Yeah, but in paving and maintenance, we right now have 452,000. Utility tax fund, we have $551,000. So if we can use part of this, in Park and Rec as of today, we have 131. So if we can use paving and maintenance to take care of some of this, then I would say that's how much we need to pull out and have that. And whatever we can use for utility tax out of this, that's how much we pull out of that.
Just as an FYI, when we start this budget season, one of the projects that I'm going to be pushing for is the repavement of Oleander Avenue. It needs it worse than any other road in town.
I understand, but we're in this year's budget right now. And last year when we talked about budget, we didn't budget anything with the Park and Rec, and I know you're talking about the roads, and so I understand that. But if we don't make a stand for the Parker Park, it is never going to happen. It's always going to be too much money. Always. We're never gonna get something that we wanna live with for 100,000. We're just not gonna do that. It's not feasible.
How much of that is paving?
Well, it's under all site work. It's 45,000. Can't,
So it's more.
And then part of that money, again, is grading and fill and pack underneath.
Well, that's
the
what I'm-
asphalt.
yeah.
But that's all
what-
part of that's all
grading,
part of a paving project.
installation, stormwater infrastructure, sidewalk, handicap parking,
So I would recommend, we've got the 100,000 already, we did the budget amendment on that for the county, the 100,000 from Bay County. We could pull 100,000 out of Parks and Rec impact fees, that's exactly what it's for new parks, it's for growth, we can't use it for anything other than growth in new parks, so $100,000 Parks and Rec impact fees. And then 40,000 out of the utility tax fund and 35,000 out of paving and maintenance. I think that'll get us to 278, or maybe we need 38,000.
what did you say, 100,
40 out of utility taxes, and then the remaining out of paving and maintenance, because if the paving and all the site work is 45,000, then we could certainly take 35 out of, or 38, whatever. Trying to do
So-
the math quickly.
Before we get too crazy with the paving and maintenance, let me check statute, because I think it's for strictly paving and maintenance of roads based on the gas tax.
Okay.
But I'm not positive.
Okay, and
We'll
that's
verify
what,
that. And if that's the case, then we take the 78,000 from utility tax. But Parks and Rec, that's what that 100,000 is for. It's for new parks. That's exactly what it's for. We've got 130-something thousand in there.
131,000
Let's-
today.
I mean, we could take it all if we wanted to, but let's leave the 31 in there and let's just take the 100,000 and. Because that's restricted under statute. It has to be for new growth for Parks and Rec. So do you you need a motion tonight, Adrian, on?
I have no.
Well, you
That's
said you
correct.
wanted
You said
to,
you
you wanted to
need-
what? You wanted to research and what can be taken out and what can't, so.
I'll come up with something in ordinance form.
For the budget amendment, is that?
Mhm.
But, Mary, just so you'll know, Nick was at the meeting and he provided the guidance on that we could award the bid and then do the budget amendment later.
County and municipal government shall utilize monies received pursuant to this chapter only for transportation expenditures.
So then we pull, so for transportation, so it could,
Well, that could even be the,
Parking.
and that could be the gravel exit. That's transportation.
So
That's
let's-
another 15,000.
so let's take 40 out of utility tax and the rest out of paving and maintenance and we're done.
I'll come up with something more as a week, so.
Okay.
Okay, you caused a considerable amount of trouble. How much more do you have?
How about I wrap up on a good note?
Okay.
No, for the city maybe, but I have a note in here saying that PRI will provide a task order proposal to the city for services during construction. After talking with the mayor and then talking over with Cliff Wilson, since we volunteered services for this project, not seeking compensation for them, we'll continue that through construction phase services. So
Well,
I
thank you very
apologize
much.
if I caused anybody's heart rate to go up, but we'll help out there too, so. Any questions from anybody on any of this? I agree with the mayor, I've caused enough issues.
Moving slowly on. We'll have the second reading of ordinance 634. Motion to read ordinance 634 by title only.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second.
Second.
Please read ordinance 634 by title only.
Ordinance number 634. An ordinance establishing a civic center rental fee, establishing current rates to be charged for the use of the civic center in Rancho Beach, repealing ordinances and/or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, and providing effective date.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about this ordinance? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 634.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Blackburn?
Yes.
Ms. Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Castro?
Yes.
Okay. Mail planning and zoning appointments, we have 2 candidates that we need to vote on tonight.
Yes, sir. Would recommend the appointment of Mr. Driver to alternate number 1 and Ms. Wilker as alternate number 2.
You've heard the recommendation of the city administrator. We've reviewed their applications. Is there a motion to elect or appoint these 2 people to the planning and zoning?
So moved.
Have a
Second.
motion.
Second.
We have a second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Blackburn?
Yes.
Ms. Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
And Ms. Castro?
Yes.
Okay. St. Joe agreements, we've talked about these at the previous meeting as well. These are, Al, you want to remind us what they are?
Yes, sir. The first one is the agreement between the city and St. Joe Company for us to put up the bumper guards, rubber guards at the boat ramp so that the boats don't get damaged or go underneath it. The St. Joe Company would prefer that we do this through the agreement process so that they're protected. And so we need that approved, if you would.
Okay. Sorry, I was listening closely, but did you say both of them, or just one?
Just the one.
Yeah, remember the second one, that's private property, and we questioned that.
That's something we're going to have to continue to talk about, though. There's a stormwater issue over there in those 2 subdivisions. It's got to have an evacuation route. So we've got to pursue that in the future, even though it is private property. It's not a very wide piece of private property, but it's where the water goes. So we have to talk about that.
Yeah, I thought we'd take them one at a time, so this is the first of the
To be
2.
fine. Okay, a motion to sign this agreement.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Blackburn?
Yes.
Ms. Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Castro?
Yes.
And the second one is for cleaning out the ditches for Joe Drive. For those who don't know, Joe Drive is still owned by the St. Joe Company, and that is the north-south road between Casuna Subdivision and Ocean Plantation. We have a problem with someone building a home on Bailey Lane right now that is getting some backup due to the fact that those ditches are not cleaned out. And one of the questions that was asked last week was, how is this different than the ditch behind Mr. Foley's property? And the answer is, Mr. Foley's property wasn't so much a problem with the drainage at the time. That was more for aesthetics and the request of the neighbors to cut the stuff down for snakes and critters that get in there. In this particular place, we have a homeowner who is directly affected by the whole thing and would request that we take care of getting that done. And Philip can add more to that if need be.
Well, here's my concern with that. The statutes are clear. You can't use taxpayer money on private property. You just can't do it. So if we feel like that this is, what I heard last week is that drains into the wetlands, it doesn't come into our stormwater system,
It does.
does it?
It
Yay or
does.
nay?
That ditch drains down to the canal at 15th Street, yes.
All that street. So last week we said it flowed into the wetlands behind it. That's not accurate.
No, that's correct too. There's a ditch right along the edge of the wetlands.
So which way does it flow? To the wetlands or to 15th Street? This St. Joe ditch, which way is it
15th.
going? It's going to 15th Street?
It wants to go to 15. It can't get there. It's dammed off.
If we need, I mean, we have ditches like that all over town on private property where my lot floods. But we can't start going on private property and spending taxpayer money to clean out ditches that property owners are responsible for cleaning out. And if it's part of our stormwater system and we need to get with Nick and work to get the city an easement, then let's do that. But we can't be spending taxpayer money cleaning out ditches that private property owners should be cleaning out. And it's unfortunate for the owner, but we have situations like that all over town where people flood when it rains heavy. And it's because of stormwater issues on private property. So we just can't start doing that. So if we need to address it, then let's address it the proper way, which is get the proper easement so that we can take care of that issue.
Well, that ditch does cut through part of our easement on the
But-
backside of Ocean Plantation.
But that's not the part we're cleaning out.
Well, I don't see the need in cleaning out bits and pieces of it, not cleaning out the whole thing.
Well, I'm just telling you what the statutes say. You can't spend taxpayer money to clean up private property, so we either need to get an easement or we need to ask the St. Joe Company to clean it up. I mean, it's that simple.
Dean, I have a question of you, if you will, please. When we did the stormwater project on 15th Street, did we go on any private property there to do it?
Not that I'm aware of.
The boxes up in the streets that flooded 15th Street, we didn't work on those?
Not outside, yeah, that's true, not outside of the easement. A city easement.
So we had an easement.
I know one of the things of the stormwater master plan was to acquire easements so that we can do it.
That's correct.
Right.
And it's the same thing I said last time, that we probably need to get an easement from St. Joe Company. I know they're not going to improve it because that land's not developed. They have no reason to improve it. There's no harm to them on their land. But it certainly is an impact on those two subdivisions and Bailey Drive.
Well, we haven't had an issue until that new home was built. 4 years, I've never heard a complaint or an issue for that area, but now
It was
we
a
have
water
home.
lot back then,
And I
yes, ma'am.
saw that home. I mean, I saw it when the water was standing there, but I've got pictures of my home and my next door neighbors I'll be happy to show you just from a few weeks ago. I had 3 inches of water inside. So if we're gonna start, cleaning up private property, then we've got issues all over town. But the statutes are clear, we can't do it unless we have a proper easement. So if we need to do it, let's get an easement, but without an easement, we shouldn't be doing it.
Does that mean we need to start getting easements for the larger ditch that runs through town?
I think that's part of the
if-
stormwater master plan, is to start acquiring easements so that we can clean up those ditches.
Because a lot of that big ditch, we don't own.
What big ditch are we talking about?
The one that cuts through 15th Street, connects in the 8th Street Canal, and connects wherever it connects over here on this end. We don't own a lot of that.
I would have to defer to our engineers. I don't know what's an easement and what's not. I just can tell you what the statute says.
I understand that, but I'm telling you, we don't own a lot of that ditch. So I'm just asking, should we start approaching to try to get easements for all these areas? If we're gonna commit to our stormwater master plan, then we should commit.
Well, exactly, and that's in the stormwater master plan, that we would acquire easements for areas that have been identified in the stormwater master plan.
What is the process of acquiring an easement? Do we have to pay them for their property? It's just an easement. It's just an easement.
In some instances, you'll be granted access for maintenance purposes. Usually there is a fee associated with it. Because it does encumber their property, what they can do in that area.
It's much the same as the agreement we're asking them for. We're asking them to form an agreement to do the same thing.
Correct.
Well, we're just asking if we can spend taxpayer money to go on that property and clean it up. We're not asking for an easement. We should be asking for an easement if that's what we need to do.
Let me ask you a question. Is it only going to benefit that one homeowner?
No, it'll benefit multiple.
Who else will it benefit? Because I don't know of any other.
The property owners across the street from them,
Across from the Bailey Lane?
across from the house that just got built on Bailey Lane. They flood worse than the house on Bailey Lane, or the one that just got built on Bailey Lane.
I know there's
It's an
a
empty
storage
lot.
building.
It is an empty lot. They just cleared it. They're in the process of selling all that good
Oh,
stuff.
right beside it.
On the other side of Bailey Lane.
So
Yes,
any-
across the street.
Across Bailey Lane. Yeah, I know which lot you're talking about.
All right. We're going to go back to the city attorney and ask him to prepare an easement or request for an easement.
And all of
But-
the backside of Ocean Plantation.
Right, but what I would say is, we spent a lot of money developing a stormwater master plan, and that plan, which Dina did a great job with, it's very detailed, very comprehensive. If we're gonna start buying easements, we need to buy easements based on the priority in that stormwater master plan. So whatever was identified as the priority, the worst area in our city where we've got that lady who has to sandbag her front door every time we have heavy rain, those are the areas, if we're gonna start spending money on easements, we need to follow that stormwater master plan, and we need to acquire easements based on priority, not because somebody's got an issue. It needs to be based on priority.
No, I don't necessarily agree with that. The priority's in a plan versus somebody who's really got a problem right now.
The people in that plan have a problem right now. That's
Okay.
why they're high priority in that plan.
Well, I understand
That's what the
that.
plan identified, the areas that are most in need, and that's what we should be following. We spent a lot of money to develop it and a lot of money to look to see where the greatest need was, and we've identified that.
Okay. Other questions now?
I have none.
Thank you. City Hall. We've gone through a bid process. We've talked about alternatives, and we have a low bidder for a stick-built building. We've had a week to ask the contractor any questions that we may have. And I think it's time to vote to accept the bid of our lowest bidder so he can proceed with building the City Hall.
Well, I'd like to have some discussion and also talk about the conversation I had with the contractor. I put together a document, just to help me, kind of compare the different bids. You guys wanna see it up on the screen? You may have to make that a little bit larger for people to see.
Yeah.
Do they have one?
Hey, Judy.
So, of course, we're comparing it to the Foley property. We had one modular, and the other three were stick-built. In our last meeting, I was under the impression that F&B was the only stick-built, but all three of those were stick-built homes, or buildings. So if you look at the purchase price, or in this case, the bid price for the modulars and the three stick-builts, and then you add the site work, which is not included in the bid package. None of the bidders included the site work. So we know that that's expected to be anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000, because remember, we've got to repair the park, we've got to move all that. We gave up, we couldn't get a retention pond on that property and still get the city hall on there, so we ended up we've got to pipe the storm water to the ditch in the back. It got a little expensive, but it's $150,000. It was 100 to 150, so I just put 150 because we could expect that. So under as expected, okay, so when I went and looked at the detailed bids, and if you look at the detailed bids, there's a lot of things that aren't included. And we're not really comparing the three stick-builts. We're not comparing apples to apples, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look at the details, some of them included things like the $600,000 and the $674,000 when they included additional things, landscaping. I think one even outlined all of their allowances. I talked to Kelly Forehand at F&B because his stick-built price was $200,000 plus less than the other two, which is that's a huge amount of difference. I've been told that the average square foot price for commercial construction in our area is $170 a square foot. One of these came in at $187, one came in at $210, F&B was at $130, which is extremely low. So when I talked to Kelly, I asked him about additional requirements. For example, we know that in our IT room, we're going to have additional cooling. We learned that from the police department, and typically that's accomplished with a split mini unit. We know that we have specific power requirements for our copier room and for our IT room and our servers, and we've got all of the IT cabling and everything that has to be done. Well, none of that is included in these bids, and what Kelly told me is that their understanding was this is just base bid building in order to allow us to compare costs between modular, stick-built metal. So they fully expected, because it's a design-build contract, that they would see change orders. There would be a post-bid meeting where the bid would, the awarded contractor would sit down and actually hammer out then the details. And those would be accomplished through change orders, which would increase the price. So I'm a little concerned that what we're getting isn't really what we need. So we're gonna build brand new, knowing that we're not really getting it exactly like we want it brand new. We're just gonna go with this floor plan that the mayor pulled off the internet, and we don't really know what the end result. If we awarded it to the lowest bidder, which would be F&B, and I have heard nothing but great things about the quality of their construction, but I'm a little concerned about the price after talking to Kelly, because I know that there are so many things that we're gonna need that's not included in that price. And while some of the things individually seem to be small hits, collectively they could be a large amount of money. So that's my concern with that one low bid. But anyways, I went back and I just compared them all, because I left here last week thinking, well, 416, that's not bad. So when I look at what we get for each property, for growth, the Foley property gives us room for growth. We have no room for growth on that park property. We are what we are. I know that I've heard, there's been comments about growth, what growth? Well, just this past year, we added one employee, and we moved our code enforcement from part-time to full-time. So the city is growing. You can look around and see that we're growing. If we have just one of those developments just outside the city developed, which has already been approved, the one for Bay County, that could be up to 600 homes. And we're gonna have to add to our utility department to handle that load. So we're gonna have growth. We're gonna need growth. And it would be crazy for us to build a brand new city hall that can't grow with us. We have no space to grow. Archives, we know that the Foley property gives us heated and cooled, a separate building for our city archives, which is a big issue and has been a big issue. And I guess they're still sitting in the garage area of our work center. Is that a yes, Adrian? That's where they still are. We could, with the modulars, or the 4 bids that we received, yeah, we could use one of those offices. But the Foley property gives us separate space for city archives. Land, we get no land at all, 0 land with the 4 options. That price tag is without any land. We actually lose 1/3 of our park. When the Citizens Advisory Board, when we pulled them together to help us make a decision, and Linda, you were you chaired that board, so you know what I'm talking about. Nobody was using Municipal Park at the time. It was pretty dead. And then pickleball picked up, and now I understand that sometimes people who want to play basketball have to wait on pickleball and vice versa, and our tennis courts are full, and people are using the parks all the time, and we have a grant to improve that park. So things have changed. So I don't know. I look at this. I was also concerned about the life expectancy. For a brand new stick built, we can only expect 30 years. One of them was only 20 to 25 years. That doesn't even make sense to me that that's the life expectancy. That will tell you the quality, I believe, of what we would be getting. But I think that the Foley property is still the best deal. Time frame, we could be in there in 45 days. We're talking about 6 months or more on all of the other options. So I don't agree that we should just award this low bid, because I know that's not going to be the final price. And I don't think we're getting the best bang for our buck.
I appreciate your comments and your chart, but your chart has voodoo math on it. We've talked to a ton of contractors that said remodeling the Foley property and turning it into a city hall for $25,000. That's pretty absurd. Still a 40-year-old building. If I go get a facelift, I may look like I'm 40, but I'm still 63. So refurbing a 40-year-old house still is not a good option. I talked to Kelly forehand. This is a brand new building built with our floor plan to Florida commercial code spec standards. that has 3 more offices in the building than we even need now, built on our land so we can get full dollar for our benefit. And yes, there will be a few minor change orders, but none structurally. The building will be ready to be hooked up and inhabited. We know we've got to do the site work.